was pretty difficult in the first few years, losing 100 games, to keep everybody, upbeat in those situations. But when you win a few games and you get into the winning the 80s and 80 games, 90 games, you get a little more confident and you really believe that you belong there.
The nucleus of the team was there, and they were young. We were young, but it was a team that could compete and would compete year after year. It was pretty consistent baseball through the latter part of the 80s.
I think everybody in the clubhouse, we all felt, the organization, that we were the best team in baseball that year. But the best team doesn't always win. We know that.
Guys got a lot of confidence from that year in 85. And like I said, we almost did it again in 87, 2 years after Bobby left, but it took us down to the last weekend. We came up short. And, as you win and you keep winning and you keep getting closer and closer, what comes first, success or confidence, And so I think a little bit of both.
I think with winning the division in 85, the Blue Jays organization realized, hey, we're for real, and we could do this every year. And, from 85 through 92, we came close to winning that division every year.
They were a very good team. Yeah, as a team you really didn't want to play. I mean, they could beat you very easily, with pitching or with hitting. I mean, they had a strong lineup. Yeah, it was a very tough team to beat. And that year, 85, I mean, they were really good. How we beat them, I still don't know. Like I said, young pitching. The pitching just pitched outstanding.
Looking back at the 1985 season, most Jays fans will remember how it ended rather than how the team got to the brink of their first World Series. A special team led by extraordinary coaches and an equally impressive front office. Together, that team, and in particular that season, would galvanize the city. The players, some with big personalities and some with small, would find a commonality and connection that would propel the team to its best ever regular season. Here's Hall of Fame broadcaster Tom Cheek and Toronto Sun columnist John Robertson on a CBC talk show after that 85 season.
When you can't win 1 out of 3 ball games, then as Jesse Barfield so aptly put it, you really don't deserve to be there.
If you want to call it chokes, the series ended 4 chokes to 3, but that's nonsense. They're 9 years old to start with. I think people lose sight of that. Here's a team that until 1983 had never finished ahead of anybody.
40 years later, the 1985 Jays team has cemented its place in the legacy of the franchise. Pat Gillick says 1985 didn't necessarily change the culture of the franchise, but it did teach the team to win.
I think the players gained a lot of confidence, and I have to attribute that to Cox and the coaching staff. But I think the players played with a lot more confidence. It was pretty difficult in the first few years, losing 100 games, to keep everybody, upbeat in those situations. But when you win a few games and you get into the winning the 80s and 80 games, 90 games, you get a little more confident and you really believe that you belong there. So I think, and as I said, the coaching staff and Cox did a good job of keeping them upbeat and keeping them in a positive direction.
As someone who'd nearly been there from the beginning, Ernie Whitt says 1985 did have a positive influence on the organization.
I do believe that it did. I don't know. I mean, I think Pat had worked so hard to get the type of players that he wanted. The 85 season, we won the division, we lost in the playoffs, but the nucleus of the team was there, and they were young. We were young still, some younger than others, but it was a team that could compete and would compete year after year. 86 was a disappointment, I think. Then we came back in 87 and had a tremendous season, only to falter at the end of the season. 88, again, was a little bit of a down year, and then 89, we came back and we won our division. So, it was pretty consistent baseball through the latter part of the 80s.
That first trip to the postseason definitely put the Jays on the right path for future success, according to Rance Mulliniks.
Most certainly when you start to have a lot of success, more people want to play with that ball club because they could, players look around the league, they know, and that's a great club over there. They're young. They're going to be that way for a while. That's a place I want, at least if you want to go try to win a championship, you say that's a place I wanted to play. So it makes it a little easier to pick up a free agent here or there, or, trade for somebody. One of the things that, and again, it goes back to 85 and into the early 90s when the Blue Jays were having all that success. We had depth in the minor leagues. If somebody got hurt, we could go get somebody that could come up and fill. Like I said, '85, we bring Tom Henke up in July. I think he saved 16 games the rest of the season. Without him, we don't get there. We don't get to the postseason. That's an example. We had a starter too. I think Clancy went down for a little bit.
Tom Filer went 7-0 in 9 starts, starting on July 22nd and ending on September 26th.
Those types of things, you have to have that to fill that role. It also allowed the ball club, when you're developing players, and you've got a lot of really good prospects at the minor league level, to say, hey, we need a major leaguer to fill this role on our big league club. We've got some talent that somebody over here that has that player would be willing to trade that player for a player or two from out of our minor league system that potentially down the road is going to fill a role in the big leagues that they need. So those things, that's why you got to have balance throughout the organization. You got to have good scouting, you got to have good development, and you got to be able to develop your players, because it not only helps you with your big league club bringing somebody up, but it also helps you when you make a trade. You have talent that you can trade to pick off a player that you need that can immediately have an impact at the major league level. I would say, even though we lost, the fact that we were able to get over the hump over 162 games in a tough division and ultimately on the last weekend of the season beat a tremendous Yankee ball club, because they had some great talent, great players too, proved to the organization that what they had been doing prior to 85 and what they would continue doing post 85 was a successful model. And we just need to keep tweaking it here and there as we need to. And history proves that that was correct.
Tom Henke says 1985 felt like the start of something special.
And even the 84 season, they were starting to really rise to the top in the American League East. And they were just missing a few pieces to make that happen. And in 85, I came over, which I'm sure was a big surprise to everybody, that I did as well as I did. It would surprise me, because I'd struggled in Texas some, but it was just right time, right place. And, I think with winning the division in 85, the Blue Jays organization realized, hey, we're for real and we could do this every year. And, from 85 through 92, we came close to winning that division every year. There was only a couple, one maybe or 2 years that we were out of it, maybe by the last week of the season. But other than that, it was an incredible run.
Cito Gaston says the 1985 season proved to the organization that they could win.
Oh, I think it's a big part that they knew they could win. Players knew that they could win, and the organization knew that they could win. And it's a great organization, too. Not to say it's not a great organization now. It's just different owners that own the organization now. And they're nice people, too. And they're trying hard to win. But, we had Labatt's, and they're a great organization as far as doing things for the team and getting the players. And so is this one. They just have some bad luck. They made the playoffs a couple of times. They didn't go any further. But I really believe that guys got a lot of confidence from that year in 85. And like I said, we almost did it again in 87, 2 years after Bobby left, but it took us down to the last weekend. We came up short. And Detroit beat us out. I think we had to win one game there, too, and we didn't win it. As you win and you keep winning and you keep getting closer and closer, what comes first, success or confidence, And so I think a little bit of both. That's the thing that Bobby Maddox used to ask everybody all the time. What comes first, confidence or success? And, if you get some success, you surely get some confidence.
Here's Pat Gillick again.
Well, it got us to the playoffs for the first time, so pretty important. We were in a very tough division. And so to get there and have a chance to go to the World Series in 85, I think it was big, because it kind of proved to our players that we could play with anybody. And if, we had a break here or there, we'd have a chance to win it. So I think 85 showed that we belonged in the upper category in the American League and deserved an opportunity to compete against the best, the Bostons, and the Baltimores, and the Yankees.
For Rance Mulliniks, the 1985 season still ranks among his favorites.
Second to the 92 World Championship. I mean, that's what you play for. At least the time that I spent in the Toronto Blue Jay organization, those 11 years, that most certainly was the goal, was to get to and win a World Series championship throughout the entire organization. And it's one of the reasons why, there are other reasons that are obvious, but that we accomplished getting to the postseason 4 times before we finally won one. and of course, and won again in 93. But not winning the World Series, that Game 6, winning that Game 6 in Atlanta is number one, and closely followed by number two would be the 85 season, because that was the first time that the organization had gotten there. There was a lot of young players that they had developed and brought along within the organization that were a part of that team, which really made it special. Another thing that was so special about playing in Toronto with Blue Jays, because it's the Expos in Montreal, the fact that we not only were representing the city or a region, Ontario and the city, like most ball clubs here in the States, like where I'm sitting right now, you're either a Giant fan or you're a Dodger fan, but it doesn't really go past the borders of California. There's one here or there, but not many. But you, as a ball club in Canada, you represented the entire country. And I think that added to what made all of that so special for me, and I think for us as a team. But 92, number one, 85, number two.
Tom Henke shares that opinion that 85 and 92 were among the best Jays teams he's ever played on.
Oh, boy. The 92 team was so good, with Robbie and Johnny and Jack Morris. And, I would put those two teams really close together, 85 and 92. 92, we may have had just a little bit better pitching, all the way through. Starters, bullpen, all the way down the line. But 85 was, golly, they were awful good too. So I'd have to say put those two teams pretty darn close together. But for what we did with only 23 guys on the roster, because we didn't use Lou Thornton or Manny Lee, because they were basically A-ball players, and they were protecting them, to be able to do what we did with 23 guys, that's pretty incredible. I'd say those two teams, I would have to say, were the two best that I've ever played on.
Mulliniks felt like the Jays needed to find their footing again after Bobby Cox left. And in 1987 is when they got their mojo back.
The 87 season, I think we had rebounded back. And we had a great year, with the exception of the last week of the season. Of course, as you know, we had lost Ernie and we had lost Tony over those last handful of ball games. And I definitely feel that I could say with confidence, if they hadn't gotten hurt, that would have made the difference in a couple of ball games and we would have still won the division. But having said that, we were still talented enough and good enough to win a few games that last week to put us over the top. So we had definitely, by 1987, we had recovered from the departure of Bobby Cox, the defeat in the postseason of 85. The last week of the season, we just didn't get it done. And you can point to this or you can point to that, but the reality is we had some situations where we couldn't get a hit when we needed to, and on the other side, we couldn't get an out when we needed it. And that was tough. There's no question. Man, I remember after that game, getting beat 1-0 on Sunday. Felt like that last week lasted an eternity. I felt just as bad after that last game on Sunday as I did after the Game 7 in 85. It was terrible because we didn't have to run the board. All we had to do is win a couple of ball games. And we most certainly were still plenty good enough to do that. We did. If anything, we were just jinxed by our lack of performance the last week of the season. We just didn't play up to our ability. And that's not taking anything away from the Milwaukee Brewers or the Detroit Tigers. Nothing at all. They beat us, and those things happen. If you would ever want to say there was a team that blew it, it would be the team. And I'm not one that uses that term loosely, but that was a team that I felt like, boy, we let ourselves down. We let the fans down. We let the organization down. That's the most disappointing week that I ever had as a professional athlete. That's the toughest one. There's no question about that. There's nothing else that's even close to it for me. During the regular season, that was the toughest week ever experienced.
Rance Mulliniks would play for the Jays from 1982 until 1992. He says he never really contemplated leaving.
Never did. Loved where I was playing by that time. And before 84, I signed a 3-year deal. 84, 85, 86. Spring training of 86, I signed another 3-year extension. Beyond that, after that, I never had any desire to leave Toronto. I loved it. I loved Toronto. I loved the country. I love the organization, playing there. It was a great place to play. And it's like a second home to me by that point. So I had no desire to leave. After the 90 season, where I'd basically just been, a spot start me here or there and pinch hit coming off the bench. I was a free agent, and I had a 2-year offer from Texas, a 2-year offer from Toronto, and a 2-year offer from the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox were actually offering more money than the Blue Jays. But I wanted to stay with the Blue Jays, had no desire to leave. And as it turned out, it was a great decision because I ended up being a member, fortunately, of a World Series championship team. So once I got established there in Toronto, I never had the desire to leave. I think one of the great blessings in my life was the fact that I got to spend 11 years playing for the Toronto Blue Jays in Toronto and experience all that went with that. I couldn't have asked for a better place to spend 11 years. I had no desire to leave Toronto, no desire. That's where I wanted to finish up. I knew I was running out of time anyway. I didn't evaluate it in terms of, okay, who has the best chance to win a championship? Even if I'd have felt like Boston was maybe a little better, had a little better opportunity to do that, I would have still stayed in Toronto. I would have stayed because, like I said, at that point, it's like a second home, and I didn't want to leave. Since I retired, obviously, I spent 5 years instructing as a coach, spent 7 years in the broadcast booth. And since 2003, I've had a real estate license, but over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, I don't really do much with that. So I'm basically what I would say retired. However, I'm trying to create an opportunity for myself, get out and do some speaking, educational speaking in terms of what I've learned as a professional athlete that can help in any industry or business.
Ernie Whitt played for the Jays from 1977 to 1989 and would go on to coach for the team as well.
It was great. Absolutely great. I mean, you could see the development year after year of us improving, the players, individual players getting better and better, more consistent play coming out of them. It was a great feeling to say that I was a part of it. Each year that I played, I felt like I became more consistent and a better player. Every year that I played, I felt I was getting better all the way up to my last season in '89. It was a great feeling to think that I was a part of it, especially from the beginning where we were not so good, because watching the development of the players get better through the years. I didn't want to leave in '89, but again, that's part of baseball and decisions that, your general manager and managers make. That, okay, it's time to make an improvement or try to get our team a little bit younger and go from there. But as far as being a part of the growing of the Blue Jays from day one to my last season after the '89 season, I wouldn't change it for the world. I thought it was great. I absolutely loved it, and I wouldn't change one thing about it. Still a fan, big time fan. I watch them all the time. I'm a fan now, and I get frustrated. Last year was a very disappointing year because the expectation was higher than what we got out of them. Don't know what direction they're going. I have no idea I know they've got a couple of players that are all-star caliber players that they need to try to keep and build around, or make a decision to blow it up and start all over. Those are decisions that are above my pay grade, and I'm not a part of that. But I am a fan. That was, for my career, I was very fortunate. Number one, I'm very fortunate to be able to say that I played parts of 15 seasons in the big leagues, and 12 of them was with the Toronto Blue Jays. That's a huge part, and I think of them very fondly, and I pull for them every year. That has been a highlight of mine, is being a part of Baseball Canada. When they came to me in 1999 to ask me to manage the Pan Am Games in Winnipeg, that was the start of a beautiful relationship I've had with Baseball Canada. I've been working with Greg Hamilton since 2004, I believe it was, or maybe 2002. Kevin Brion was the one who came and brought me in, and then Greg Hamilton took over when Kevin went to the Blue Jays, I believe, as a scout. Things that we have accomplished as an organization, I think people look at Baseball Canada now and know that, we do have a lot of great players that come from Canada that play and represent the country. me being a part of it, who would have ever thought that I've traveled the world as a manager of the senior team, met many great people across the world, and represented a country that I absolutely adore. It's been a great opportunity for me, and it goes hand in hand with my time in the big leagues. It's just as much fun and excitement as playing in the big leagues. So I'm still active and trying to do stuff, and still doing some coaching clinics and stuff like that also. So I'm trying to stay busy, but still having time for golf.
Tom Henke fondly looks back in 1985 as one of the biggest impacts on his career. Henke would end his playing career in 1995, having recorded 311 saves. He sits 26th all time.
Well, it was a great impact. It wasn't the biggest impact on my career, and I'll tell you that story in a second. But, to be able to go up there and have the team and the management and everything believe in you and give you the ball, and having the success I had helps. I mean, somebody asked me one time, well, how do you forget that? Well, the only thing in a race is a bad game is a good game, So, I had a lot of good games, a lot of great games in Toronto, and that kept me on the even keel that I needed to stay on. But probably the biggest impact in my career was when my daughter Amanda was born, and she was born in 1986, and she was born with Down syndrome, and at that time they called it Mongolism. And I came home on the All-Star break in '86, and Amanda was born, and I called Jimmy. I said, "Listen, this has happened," and I didn't understand why it happened. I was really mentally not there anymore. I mean, it really hurt me, and I kind of blame God for it, for giving me a handicapped child. And I came back after Jimmy let me stay home a couple extra days, try to get my head together. And I came back, and I struggled for a couple of weeks. I really did. I never said anything to anybody except a couple of my best friends, Garth Orge, and a couple of guys, and then finally my teammates found out. But when I finally realized that this was a gift from God and not something that I did wrong and I was being punished, and I understood how special my daughter Amanda is, how it took her a long time to be able to walk or talk or do things that we took for granted. It kind of put the game in perspective for me, and really my career really took off after that. It just made me understand that having a bad game wasn't that bad, in the scheme of life. So that probably might have been it. I'm certain it was the biggest impact in my career, because after that, I don't think I ever had a bad year, a terrible year anyway. I might not have had a super year, but I always stayed pretty steady. And I got to give my daughter Amanda a lot of credit, and she still is to this day one of the greatest gifts that God's ever given me.
Henke admits that his career could have lasted a bit longer, but he decided to make more time for his family, and that remains a priority for him today.
One reason I retired in 1995 when I did, I could have played maybe a couple more years. I knew the gas tank was starting to get empty, but I wanted to be home with my kids. I wanted to see them grow up. I wanted to see my kids play high school sports, and I played with Nolan Ryan in 1993, and Nolan and I become good friends. I asked him if he had any regrets playing as long as he did. He played 27 years. He said, yeah. He says, I miss my kids. I missed all the things that go along with being a parent and watching your kids grow up. And he said, if I had any regret, but for playing that long, that would be it. So I kind of took that to heart, because that was 2 years later. I was with St. Louis, and I told the Cardinals right away, this is it. I'm going to play 1 year for you guys, and I'm done. And I want to tell you what, after the year, they tried to talk me in. They threw millions and millions of dollars at me to play another year, and I just said, no, I'm good with my decision. I'm happy with my decision. If I played longer, would I be a shoe-in for different things? I don't know. It really doesn't matter in the scheme of life. I'm a devout Christian, Catholic, and I believe that there's life after baseball, after we leave this earth, and that's what I try to take care of now. Well, I run my own charity golf tournament. I started in 1995 when I retired from the Cardinals. I wanted to give back, and we do a charity golf tournament, a celebrity tournament every October, and I've been doing it 30 years now, and going on 31 years this year. And we've raised almost $2 million for the Special Learning Center, which is a school for handicapped children. And diabetes research affects millions and millions of people every year. Diabetes, my wife's got it, so those two things. And I was very active in the DARE program for a long time. It's a drug resistance program for kids. It starts in 6th grade. And I did a lot of speaking, involved in my church, got a 1,000-acre farm. I spend a lot of time down at the farm and I've got 12 grandkids, and I try not to miss any of their events, whether it's archery or basketball or baseball or you name it. I've got them in just about band. I've got 2 of them that are really good in band. And so I've got grandkids in about every walk of life you can imagine. So that keeps me running pretty good. Now, I've done a few things for the Blue Jays since I retired. I know when Buck was manager, I went to spring training. I've done a couple of the Blue Jays fantasy camps for them. Do a lot of stuff for the Cardinals. It's so close, so handy, and they treat me like I was there my whole career. It's unbelievable, the organization that they have. So I stay busy. Not too many times that I don't have something to do. I know people ask me, what do you do with your time? Well, if you don't have anything to do, you're not trying.
Many of those players on the 1985 team went on to careers as coaches and managers. Rance Mulliniks says it illustrates who they were at their core.
I'll just speak for myself because I don't want to speak for others because I don't know what their motivations may have been. In my particular case, it goes without saying, since I was a young boy, I just had a passion for baseball that I couldn't get enough of it. Then when I got into professional baseball, and then when I got traded to Toronto, and we had Bobby Cox, Cito Gaston, Jimmy Williams, who were in terms of manager, hitting coach, third base coach, etc., were the best that I was ever around. Everybody else was almost like kind of amateur hour. Not that they weren't good baseball people, but they didn't have the ability of the 3 I just mentioned. And I learned a tremendous amount. And my motivation was, in professional baseball as a coach, was to pass that forward. What I had learned from those 3 in particular, I wanted to pass that forward and help players coming up through the minor leagues, trying to get to the big leagues as best as I could. And that was my motivation. Where I struggled with it was coaching in the minor leagues. Where I really struggled with it is I got out there and pretty quick I realized, not everybody wants it as bad as I wanted it. Not everybody wants to learn like they should. It's not that they're disrespectful or anything. It's just that they're not, the willingness to not make some change when necessary, the willingness to just say, I've always had success doing it this way, and this way I'm going to continue to do it. And as somebody who had played 15 years in the big leagues and learned from the people that I just named, you sit and go, this isn't going to work. Long term, it's not going to work. You're only going to go so far with this. And then if you're not willing to make the change, you're never going to establish yourself or play in the big leagues. And I found that side of it frustrating. But my motivation was to pass forward what I had learned and help others get to the big leagues, or at least be the best that they could possibly be. I never thought of it as being a mentor at that time. I just had some young players, and I'd been around a long time. And again, it goes back to who I had learned from. And by that time, by the time Olerud came along, Jimmy was gone. Of course, Bobby was gone. The only was left of those 3 was Cito. But I just, once in a while with John, I would pass something along to him if I thought it would help. And did the same with Jeff Kent, and tried to take him a little bit under my wing, I guess, if you will, and help him come along. Did the same thing with Ed Sprague, some to some degree with Kelly Gruber, but I never thought I was mentoring. I just thought, yeah, here's something that I think can help this young person and pass it along to them. And I think one of the greatest compliments in Baseball Digest, I don't even know if it's out there anymore. I know my dad had a copy for years, but this came post I was no longer playing. I think at the time John Olerud may have been with the Yankees at that time, maybe with the Mets. Maybe Seattle. I don't remember. But they did a one-page questionnaire that was in this little Baseball Digest magazine. And when he was asked, who's the player you learned, or the person that you learned most from in the game of baseball, and he named me. And that's I was very humbled by that. That's because I never knew it. And it was one of the greatest compliments I've ever been paid, coming from a young player like that, a guy that obviously had a tremendous career. I was very humbled by that. But I just did what some others did for me. And for the most part, for me, it came from some of it from Bobby Cox, but most of it from Cito Gaston in terms of how to hit and how to play defensively from Jimmy Williams. I will say the one thing that I did learn that Bobby Cox taught me is that as players, it's important to evaluate our strengths and our weaknesses and play to our strengths. And an example of that would be Bobby might say to me, look, you're not going to hit 25 or 30 home runs and drive in 90 or 100. We have a few other players on the team that can do that, yes. But here's what you can do. You have the ability to take pitches to let base stealers run, take strikes to let them run. Sometimes you'll even swing through a pitch, even a strike two pitch, if the runner's going to let him steal. And then if he gets to second base and there's nobody out, you have the ability to consistently pull the ball to the right side. So if you don't get a hit, you make an out, you advance that runner to third. That is something that you do as well, if not better than anybody else on the team. So those are a couple of your strengths. Well, when somebody points that out to you and you realize it's like a profound compliment to you, and it really gives you a lot of confidence and say, look, this is what you can do. And when we combine these two things together, his ability to hit the ball out of the ballpark, drive in runs, your ability to get on base, to let base runners steal, to pull the ball to the right side of the field when we need you to do it. When we combine that together, what does that do for us as a team? It makes us a much better team because it meshes so well. Everybody's doing what they do best and playing to their strengths. And when that happens, as a unit, as a group, we're going to play to the best of our ability. And if we have a lot of ability, which we did, we're going to be a doggone good ball club. You combine those three things, and that's what I was just trying to pass along.
For Cito Gaston, he'd continue to coach and eventually manage the Jays. Much like the 3 calls it took from Hank Aaron to cajole Gaston into coaching in the first place, Gaston required a little extra persuasion to take the helm of the Jays in 1989. When I asked him if the Jays had approached him earlier to manage, he says no.
I did not want the job as manager when they came out. When they fired Jimmy Williams and we both lived in Mississauga. And Gillick's secretary called me that morning. We had lost. We've been on the road. We had playing bad. We had a good team. And we just got off to a bad start. I thought we was going to turn it around. Gillick's secretary called me and said, listen, stay home. And Beast and I are coming by your house. And Gillick lived out in that area too. So I stayed home. I thought they were maybe coming out to fire me. I had no idea what they wanted. And they offered me the job. And I said, no, I don't want the job. And they said, why not? I said, it's not too often that you can go to work and really enjoy what you're doing. And do I want to give that up? And so the last thing, Beeson jumped up and said, Cito, you got it. You it. So I took the job, and we started to win. There was talk about me becoming the full-time manager. And I said, I don't know if I want to do this. And that was a strain that year, too, because I kept both jobs. I was still the hitting coach and the manager, and did a lot of pitching, too, because Whitmire wasn't really well that year, so I made all the trips to the mound. I learned a lot. I had crash course. I learned a lot that year from different ways and different things. The guys wanted me to stay as a manager, too. The guys said, why don't you take the job, Cito? So finally it came to Cleveland, and they offered me the job, and I took the job. And, the rest of it's history. It worked out for me, and I'm glad I took the job now. And, of course, I owe Sparky Anderson a little bit of that, too. God bless him. He says, Cito, take the job. If you don't take it for yourself, take it for your family. And, of course, I took the job, and, like I said, the rest of it's history. But that I wasn't offered the job before then by anyone, and I was very lucky to become a manager and never met a manager anywhere in the minor leagues anywhere else. So I was very fortunate that worked out for me.
Gaston would return to the Jays on a number of occasions, although he still doesn't know why he didn't receive a lot of interest from other teams around Major League Baseball.
Well, once I didn't get any offer, I wasn't even offered to even interview for a job for like 5 years after I was gone, something like that. They wouldn't even call me. Kansas City called me the same day that I got fired. They wanted me to come be the hitting coach. And of course, maybe that was a mistake that I didn't take the job. But I said, let me think about it. I want to see what happens if I can get another job somewhere else. And so then for 5 years, I never even got offered at a job. After a while, I stopped taking interviews because they were, at that time, they were just interviewing minorities, so they interviewed them. So I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And, you're not going to use me to just go out and interview for you, and you're still not going to give me the job. And I think the closest one I had, although I did turn one down, they didn't give me the job, but I think I had a chance to get it. But I really thought that I was going to Cleveland, so that was my mistake right there, and I didn't go. And I thought they had one in Chicago, but Ryan Starr, one thing about Ryan Starr, he really takes care of his ex-players, and I love seeing that organization take care of their alumni people. And he took Oz again over me, and of course, later on when I came back in 2008, we were in Chicago, and he was standing out there with the mayor, and Batista and Scooter was playing catch, and the ball got away and hit Ryan standing on the back of his leg. He turned around and looked at me like I threw it at him. And I picked up the ball and said, hey, I didn't throw the ball at you. He said, we would have taken you, but, Ozzie, I took I said, no problem. I said, the only problem I would have won the first year that you hired me instead of the second. Ozzie won the second year. I would have won the first year, and I turned around and walked away from him. Gordash came back to me when Fracosi was there, which was kind of strange, and asked me to come and be the hitting coach. And so I talked with Beeson about that, but Beeson said, well, that's a no-brainer, Cito. You live in Toronto. You're here. You might as well get paid for being here. And so I went back and did that for a couple of years, I think. We had some pretty good players on that team, too. I think we set a record one year. We had 4 guys hit 20 home runs before the All-Star game. So I was always proud of myself as being not only a manager, but a hitting instructor, too. That worked out for me. And I got fired again from that job, and then I went back in 2008. Stayed there 2.5 years, and then I retired from the Blue Jays and went home. And I've been home ever since. I worked for him here. I worked for him for a while, up until 2016, and then I haven't done anything else for him no more than making some personal appearances once in a while. But otherwise, that's it. I play golf. And I travel. That's my life right now, playing golf and trying to keep myself in shape, trying to stay alive or whatever, and enjoy myself.
Gaston looks back at the 1985 season fondly, but it was another couple of seasons that stand out.
You know something? I believe the 89 team, not because I was managing, because the 89 team, we were 12-24. 85 team is a great team. The 92 team is a great team. The 93 team is an even better, one of the better teams, not as good a team as we had in 85. It was just the fact that we came back 12-24 and won our division. That was my favorite team to manage because we could manufacture runs. If we late in the ball game, I had some guys that could run. We get on, we steal a base, or get guys over. So it's a fun team to manage. But I really can't. I mean, evidently you'd have to say the first World Series, but probably got to be the best team you ever had there. The first World Series. And then you come back the next year and you win again. We changed 14 guys out. We only came back with 11 guys. So you have to look at that 93 team as a good team also, because you gave up 14 guys and still want to come back and win the second time. So it's kind of tough to pick one. But when you first win the World Series, of course, that's got to be one of the best teams you ever had there.
Cito Gaston's career as a player, coach, and manager touched so many across Major League Baseball. The sport literally changed his life. It seemed like a full-circle moment for him when Dave Winfield joined the Jays in 1992. Winfield had been a member of the Padres in the early 70s, making Gaston the fourth outfielder, and eventually resulted in Gaston being traded to the Braves.
It's been a lot. It meant a lot. Dave and I talked to Dave a few days ago, and Dave, one of the guys, never played in the minor leagues. Him and John Olerud. Dave came up in I think it was 93. Yeah, 93. And Dave would hit the ball on the ground. He'd run like hell to first base and be safe. And then all of a sudden, next spring, him and a kid named Hilton, I mean, they would go 4 for 4 almost every day, 3 for 4, 4 for 4, 2 for 4, and he just battled his way on that team. And look at him; he's a Hall of Famer to talk about, right? A Hall of Famer. Of course, Flanagan, God bless his soul too. Flanagan and I played together in winter ball. And I had another player. Who was the other player I played with and played with, and ended up being their manager too. So baseball is a big family, and it's a family, and I think we all care. And it seems like we're losing guys every day nowadays, so from the big family that we have and had and whatever. But it's going to keep going and getting bigger and bigger. But Dave and I spoke to him, like I said, a few days ago, and I'm proud of what he's doing and how he's conducted his life and gone on to do bigger and better things.
Gaston still stays connected to the game, recently signing on to support the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball club of the Inter-County League.
Really, I've taken that role because I care about Toronto. Toronto's my second home or first home or whatever, whichever you want to call it. And Rob Butler is one of my players that played for me, and I thought if I could help him out a little bit, that's what I'll do. It's certainly not about the money. It's just that I try to help him out, and then I got an offer not long ago to come to spring training with the Angels. I appreciate the offer, but if I'd have been a little bit younger, I probably would have went and done that. I love teaching hitting. I love talking baseball and being around baseball, but I had knee surgery. I had knee replacement this year. I've had 2 back surgeries and a shoulder replacement. So, I'm not beat up. I'm not too much overweight. I weigh about 230, 225, depends on the day. So I'm in pretty good shape, but I just don't want to stand up all day long.
Every year, a debate persists about whether Gaston should be in the Hall of Fame. Here's his take.
I would hope that I would go in before I'm dead, but I think I'll probably get in there. I'll be one of those guys that take a nap after they're dead, which makes no sense at all to me. But, that's whatever's going to be, it's going to happen. I don't even think about it anymore. It's an honor to even think that you had a chance to get in there, But I think the problem is that I think about it. Managed a couple more years and got 1,000 wins. Probably easier for me to get in there. But, I think to me they should go back and look. And I think the most disappointing thing I ever had in my career, to me, not being in the Hall of Fame, but not ever being manager of the year. You go 12 and 24, and you take over a team, come back and win your division. I think you probably deserve being manager of the year. You win back-to-back World Series, and you also change out 14 guys from one year to the next year. Hey, you should be manager of the year somewhere in there. So I think that's more disappointing to me than being in the Hall of Fame.
Pat Gillick would retire from the Blue Jays organization after the 1994 season.
Naturally, you don't want to leave. You've been comfortable there for close to 20 years. And the help of everybody else, we brought the thing along where we had a very competitive club and a very attractive club. They haven't played particularly well since that, but I was reluctant. But, sometimes you think it's time to move on. And I think probably I had 20 years and maybe it was time to make a change.
In 1996, Gillick was back in baseball, serving with the Orioles. He then went on to work with the Mariners and the Phillies. In fact, into his 80s, he still consults for the Phillies.
Well, it's funny. I went to Baltimore, but I didn't move. I stayed in Toronto. My wife and daughter stayed up in Toronto, and I was in Toronto for another 4 years after that. In fact, maybe 5 years, because I was in Baltimore 3 years. I had a year out. When I was there in 96, 97, 98, 99, I wasn't working. So it was 2000, I think, when I went to Seattle. Yeah, my wife and I are both Canadian citizens. My son-in-law is a Canadian. So, we got heavy ties to Canada. So can't say I played 2 years in Canada and loved it. We had 20 years up there, and it was a great experience, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything. It was great.
I asked Gillick what trades or transactions he was most proud of.
Well, they used to call me Stan Pat, and we never made a lot of trades because we were trying to build a situation and didn't want to head off in another direction. If we could acquire a player that we thought was better than what we had, we probably would have moved on it. But people always were asking for too much for a player that we might have some interest in. I know that Alomar Carter is an interesting trade. I think probably, at least in my career, probably it's the one most noteworthy. But I didn't make a lot of trades. I made a lot of drafts, and both at the amateur level and the professional level. We had a rookie league team in the Gulf Coast League down in Florida, and so Epi Guerrero happened to be managing the club because we had a number of Latin players on the club. So he asked me to come down and take a look at a pitcher, and the pitcher was Jose Mesa. He was already under contract to us, but he was very proud of him, and he wanted me to see Mesa. So I went down, and the day I was there, McGriff hit a home run, and they were playing the Pittsburgh complex. He had a home run and went on a roof of a building. And so I asked Guerrero about him, and Guerrero said, yeah, he's one of the better young players in the league. And I said, well, if we get a chance, I think I'm going to try to get him in a deal. And I don't know when it was, a year or 2 years later. It might not even been a year later. We got involved in the deal with a relief pitcher. He pitched for us, and then he went to the Yankees in the deal. We were trying to get McGriff. We were holding out. This is before Mattingly really got to the point where he was the type of player he was. We tried to get Mattingly and a couple other guys. But anyway, it came down to it at the last minute. We said to the Yankees, if we can't get McGriff, we're not going to make the deal. But we ended up making the deal. So it was good for Fred, and it was good for Blue Jays.
And for Steve Balboni, after the 1985 season, he continued to play for the Royals, then play for the Mariners, and return to the Yankees. Today, he's a scout for the Giants.
Yeah, things kind of fell apart with the Royals. I had hurt my back and then kind of got phased out, and they released me in 1988. And the Mariners wanted to sign me. They were the ones interested in signing me. So I went there. They signed me, and I was just gonna be a platoon right-handed DH. It was an opportunity, so I took it. They weren't a very good team, but it turned out well for me. The first baseman got hurt, and I played first base for a few weeks and started, and really hit well and ended up being the everyday DH. So it really turned my career around. And then I ended up back with the Yankees.
40 years later, 1985 still holds a special place in the history books for the Toronto Blue Jays. Were they the best Blue Jays team ever, or just a great team that never made it to the World Series? Many members of that team still think back to that season and what could have been. But despite the heartbreak, 1985 started the franchise on a journey that would ultimately result in 2 World Series championships in the early 90s. Lessons are learned when you lose. Jinxes are broken when you keep getting up after you fall. The culture of the Toronto Blue Jays shifted after that 1985 season from new kid on the block to a franchise that deserved to stand amongst the best in baseball.
Still sinking in for fans of the Toronto Blue Jays. The team isn't going to the World Series.
Once upon a time, Toronto set out on a search for a Major League Baseball team, and within 10 years would succeed in a mission impossible.
Most of the audio used in this series was original. Audio from the 80s is courtesy and property of Major League Baseball, NBC, CTV, ESPN, and CBC. Audio from 1985 included the voices of Bob Costas, Tony Kubek, Don Chevrier, Fergie Oliver, Mel Allen, Knowlton Nash, Peter Mansbridge, Claude Adams, and Vin Scully, among others. Special thanks to Rance Mulliniks. Also to Pat Gillick, Ernie Whitt, Cito Gaston, Tom Henke, and Steve Balboni. Thank you to the Summit Area Old Guard. There's a tremendous amount of helpful online content about the 85 season. We appreciated the work of the Society for American Baseball Research, baseballreference.com, Baseball Canada, Sportsnet, Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum, Cooperstowners in Canada.com, and Once Upon a Time in Sports. You might also be interested in reading Buck Martinez's From Worst to First, the Toronto Blue Jays in 1985. Dan Flaherty's Major League History Sports article titled 1985 Toronto Blue Jays, an expansion franchise arrives in the postseason. Bob Elliott's If These Walls Could Talk, Toronto Blue Jays, stories from the Toronto Blue Jays dugout, locker room, and press box. Darren Clark's The Left Field Lark article from July 2021, bringing the 1985 Blue Jays back to life. Or Jeff Blair's Full Count, 4 decades of Blue Jays baseball. The music in this series is the property of its owners, Nate Blaze, Joel Cummings, DJ Williams, and the Late Night Feeler. All music is used through the Creative Commons license of YouTube's audio library and Pixabay. If you enjoyed the series, please share it with others or even rate it. And if you have the means, consider making a donation to Jays Care, your local food bank, or a charity of your choice. If you want to share your memories of that season or your thoughts about this series, email us at okbluejays@mail.com or check out our Substack. This has been OK Blue Jays, the emergence of a franchise. I'm Sam Charles. Thanks for listening.